I came across a really interesting story in the news this morning, which they took from Reddit, as I noticed that they often do. Reporters obviously get an interesting thread from Reddit and turn it into a news story, so I thought I would do exactly the same thing, full disclosure here and now. So welcome back, I'm the Black Belt Barrister, helping you to understand law. So this story was somewhat interesting in that there's a legal aspect to it, but it was on Reddit, under the subreddit, Am I the Now this lady had somebody parking on her driveway without permission. Apparently they used to park there when the house belonged to her aunt, but continued parking there afterwards. And after many requests politely to stop parking there and park somewhere else, the lady continued to do so. So after a while of being frustrated, the author of this post said that she called the non-emergency police help number and they came to tow the vehicle away. This is what we would refer to in law as abating a nuisance. So I'm going to read this story to you. I want you to comment in the box below whether you think this woman was in the right or not. And of course, I'll give you some of my legal points on it as well. So in the post, she writes that she recently inherited this terraced house off her late child-free aunt. And while the housing market is what it is, she decided to move into the house permanently for the foreseeable future, as it was a lovely house in a nice area, so why not? It had a driveway, which was pretty neat, but there was one problem. One of the neighbours keeps parking on the driveway. She said that she talked to her politely about it, and then she explained that her aunt used to let her park in the driveway because her aunt didn't have a car, whereas she and her husband have a car each and their driveway can only fit one car. The author of the post said that she did not drive either, but the reason that she didn't want her parking there was that she was disabled and uses crutches to get around. She says that when the neighbour parks in the driveway, the space around the car is quite narrow, making it very difficult to get to her own front door, putting her at risk of injury. Now, just pausing there for a moment, aside from the fact that this lady was parking on the driveway without permission, this is obviously causing a foreseeable risk to the person who owns that driveway, the author of this article, and as she quite rightly puts, putting her at risk of injury. Reading on. She says that she tried to explain this to the neighbour and asked her if she could please find somewhere else to park her car. She seemed to understand but didn't promise anything. She kept parking in the driveway. She said she talked to her again and she said she can't park anywhere else because it would be too far to walk to their house. And she said she has 3 young children who frequently travel in her car. The author said she got annoyed because she felt like she just didn't want to change her habits, but she was a bit shy and not good at confrontation and just told her that she hopes she can figure something out that doesn't involve parking in her driveway. Well, then she writes that a few days prior she was coming home from work and this neighbour had parked in her driveway once again. This time the car was parked really forward, super close to the front door, making it pretty much impossible to get into her own house. She writes that even an able-bodied person wouldn't be able to get in there. There was no space to even open the front door, as it opens outwards. The author writes, "Here's what probably makes me an asshole. I was really angry and tired of the situation, so without trying to talk to the neighbour again, I called the police on the non-emergency number," which was the right thing to do, by the way, explained the situation, and they showed up and towed the neighbour's car. The author writes, obviously she was annoyed when she found out and showed up at the door the next day. She said, "I'm inconsiderate and should learn how to compromise. And if I asked her, she would have moved her car," but the author doesn't believe her. Now, the legal position on this is relatively clear. The person whose driveway it is shouldn't really be making any efforts themselves to remove the car, because that might well constitute either conversion of property if you treat it as the owner, or potentially criminal damage if you cause any damage to the vehicle. But abating a nuisance is something that would be within your rights as the owner of the property, so long as, of course, you don't cause any damage to the car. In this post, I can say that this was absolutely the best thing to do because she called the police non-emergency number, so it wasn't abusing police time because she used the non-emergency number, and she called the police to do it, so she didn't even do it herself, so she didn't risk a civil claim against her for conversion of property or for damaging the vehicle. But suffice to say, the police did take it seriously enough to come and remove the vehicle, and I for one am pleased that this has resolved the situation without any kind of criminal damage and certainly without any kind of violence between the parties. These kind of neighbour and boundary disputes are sadly very common, but there is usually a way of resolving these disputes peacefully and amicably, even if it might cost you a little bit of money or a little bit of inconvenience. In this case, the neighbour really should have parked somewhere else, even though it was causing her inconvenience. On the other hand, they might have come to an agreement whereby why she would park further away from the door, and if it were possible to park there, perhaps some kind of compensation under the strict agreement that she didn't obtain any rights or interest in the land. Perhaps just a license to use part of the driveway. The key legal difference between a license and a lease or a tenancy being that a license doesn't attract any kind of interest in the land or the property itself. It's simply temporary permission to use it. So perhaps if you wanted to borrow your neighbour's driveway for a period of time on some payment or otherwise, you might agree to some kind of license agreement between them to avoid this kind of scenario. But either way, I thought that was an interesting story to share with you because many of you might have exactly this kind of problem. And in our chambers, not that I very often plug our own chambers and our own law firm, in our chambers we do have barristers that specialise in neighbour and boundary disputes such as these, and property disputes including ownership and all of these kind of things. In fact, I'm shortly going to invite one of our very senior barristers onto this show to talk to you about property and boundary disputes and arguments and things of that nature. So if you have those kind of questions, pop those in the box down below as well. I will prime him to get ready to answer those questions for you when I bring him on. In the meantime, please do like the video and subscribe, and as always, thank you for watching.